Before you fall asleep tonight, think about this. What if the deepest wound in your life wasn't caused by a knife, but by a single sentence you still remember? Years later, take a slow breath. Let your mind begin to quiet down. In every human life, there are wounds that everyone can see. A cut on the skin, a pain in the body, and with time, they slowly heal. But there are also other kinds of wounds. Wounds that do not bleed, that have no shape, and that no one can see. And yet, they stay much longer than anything else, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, and sometimes they follow a person for an entire lifetime. These are the wounds created by words. A single sentence spoken in anger can break a relationship built over years. A few careless words can stay in someone's mind long after you've forgotten them. And the most frightening part is the one who speaks forgets quickly, but the one who listens remembers for a very long time. In every human life, there are wounds that are easy to see. A scratch on the skin, a pain on the body. With time, they slowly heal. But there are also wounds that do not bleed, that have no shape, that no one can see. And because of that, they stay much longer than anything else. Sometimes for a few months, sometimes for many years. And some wounds follow a person for an entire lifetime. These are the wounds created by words. A single sentence spoken in anger can break a relationship built over many years. A harsh remark said in just a moment can keep someone awake for many nights. A sentence that seems like just words can become a painful memory that the listener never forgets. Some people lose a close friend because of one sentence. Some people watch their families grow distant. Husbands and wives drift apart. Children withdraw. Siblings become strangers, all because of words that were never held back. There are even people who spend their whole lives doing good things, but just because they could not control their speech in moments of anger, they unknowingly cut away their own blessings. People often say a sharp knife can cut the skin, but cruel words cut deep into the heart. A wound on the body can be treated, but a wound in the heart, many times, no one can see it, and no one knows how to heal it. And the most frightening part is, the one who speaks often forgets very quickly, but the one who hears remembers for a very long time. There is something many people have never truly realized. No words ever appear by accident. Every sentence you speak has already been formed before that, inside your mind. The Zen master Hu Neng once taught, the root of confusion does not lie in outward actions. It lies in the very moment a thought arises in the mind, and words are simply the next step of that thought. In simple terms, before you say something hurtful, your mind has already become uncomfortable. Before you speak harshly, your mind has already generated anger. Before your words hurt someone, something within you was already unsettled. So, a true practitioner is not someone who only sits before an altar, not someone who only chants or prays, but someone who, in the very moment the mind begins to stir, can still pause before speaking, hold back a sentence that was about to be released, swallow a reaction when the ego feels challenged. That is real practice, because skipping a meal is not difficult. Staying up late is not difficult. Appearing calm in front of others is even easier. But when you are misunderstood, when you are looked down on, when you are hurt, and you still choose not to speak harshly, that is true strength, true merit, and true wisdom. Many people think spiritual practice is something big, but in reality, it begins with very small things, from holding back a sentence when angry, staying silent for a moment instead of arguing, slowing down when emotions rise, because just one uncontrolled sentence is enough to create karma, and once words are spoken, karma has already begun. On the other hand, if you can pause just for a moment, you have already avoided causing harm, protected a relationship, and quietly accumulated merit. No one sees it, but it still happens. Many people believe that karma is only created when we do something very bad, very serious, very extreme. But the truth is, karma does not always begin that way. Very often, karma begins from things that are incredibly small, things that we do every day, without even noticing. A harsh word to a child when they are still young, a critical remark toward your partner at the dinner table, a raised voice directed at your parents when you are not in a good mood, a sarcastic comment toward a colleague in front of others, a negative word spoken behind someone's back just to release frustration. All of these things, on the surface, seem small, but every time it happens, you are planting a seed. That seed may not grow immediately, but it never disappears. There are words you have long forgotten, but the person who heard them still remembers. There are sentences you said just to let off steam, but someone else carries that pain for a very long time. People fear a sharp knife because it can cut the skin, but few realize that cruel words are far sharper. A knife cuts the body, but words cut straight into the mind. A wound on the body can be bandaged, but a wound in the heart, many times, no one knows, and it cannot be healed right away. And then, those small wounds accumulate day by day, little by little, until they become distance within a family, coldness in relationships, silence between people, and loneliness. Without knowing why, there are people who grow older and feel more alone, not because life is unfair, but because, in the years before, they spoke too many words that hurt others. By the time they want to change, others are already tired. By the time they want closeness, people have learned to keep their distance. On the other hand, there are people who rarely speak harshly, not because they do not know how, but because they know how to stop at the right moment. One sentence left unsaid can sometimes save an entire home. One moment of restraint can sometimes preserve an entire relationship. From the outside, it may look like they are losing, but in truth, they are quietly accumulating blessings. There is a very common misunderstanding that silence means losing, that holding back means weakness, that not responding means inferiority. But the truth is, the one who cannot control their words is the one who is truly weak in front of emotions, weak in front of the ego, weak in front of the anger rising within. On the other hand, the person who can hold their words when the mind is in turmoil, that is real strength. Strength is not about speaking to win. It is about knowing when there is no need to win. Strength is not about reacting immediately. It is about being able to pause when everything inside pushes you to speak, because saying something harsh is easy, but holding back a sentence that was about to be spoken is difficult. Many people speak and feel relieved in the moment, but afterward, what follows is regret, guilt, and loss. You speak and think you have won, but in reality, you lose connection. You speak and think you released anger, but your heart becomes heavier. There are relationships that do not break because of one big event, but break because of too many small words accumulated over time. And then there comes a moment when it is not that love is gone, but there is no longer enough strength to endure more hurt. On the other side, those who practice restraint may not win every conversation, but they preserve respect, trust, and long-lasting relationships. There is an old saying, trouble comes from the mouth. A very small mouth can open the door to very great misfortune, and that same mouth, if guarded well, can bring blessings, good connections, and peace. So, self-control is not about appearing gentle, nor is it about pretending to lose. It is about protecting yourself, protecting your mind from anger, your life from unnecessary trouble, and your relationships from avoidable cracks, because there are words once spoken that can never be taken back. A man who lost his family just because he could not control his words. In a small rural village, there was a man named Fuak. He was not a bad person. In fact, he could be considered a responsible man. He worked hard. He did not drink excessively. He did not gamble. He took care of his family. From the outside, everyone thought his family was stable, but only those living inside understood that the atmosphere at home was always tense because of one thing, very small, yet very big. He could not control his words. Whenever something did not go his way, his tone would immediately change. No thinking, no consideration. His words would flow out, sharp and cold. There were times even he himself could not remember what he had said, but the ones who heard remembered very clearly. His wife at first tried to endure. She thought, "He just has a bad temper. He will change." But as time passed, every time he raised his voice, her heart shrank a little. She began to speak less, share less, and gradually she no longer wanted to open up, not because she stopped loving him, but because every time she opened her heart, there was a risk of being hurt, and the children also changed in a very quiet way. Whenever their father came home, the atmosphere immediately became heavy, not because they did not love him, but because they were afraid of saying something wrong, of doing something wrong, of one small mistake, turning everything tense. One day, just because a child spilled a cup of water, a very small incident, he spoke harshly. The child did not cry at that moment, but that night, hugging a pillow, cried alone. From that day on, the child became more timid, afraid to make mistakes, afraid to speak, afraid of being judged. One sentence from a father, which seemed insignificant, planted a fear that lasted a very long time. Years later, when Fuak realized his family had grown distant, he began to ask himself, "I did not lack money. I did not neglect my family. So why has everything become cold?" And then, when he looked back, he finally understood the problem was not in big things. It was in small words every day. Those sentences that when spoken, he thought were normal, but in reality, they were like tiny needles, day after day, piercing into the hearts of his loved ones, until those small wounds became a very large distance. By the time he wanted to change, to speak more gently, to make up for it, it was already too late, because trust is not lost in a single day, but it also cannot be rebuilt in a single day. That is karma created by speech, not something distant, not something in another life, but something that appears right here in this very life. In another place, there was a woman named Le. Her life was not luxurious, but it was enough. She worked hard. She took care of her family. She was not a bad person, but there was one habit, quietly making her life heavier and heavier. It was this: whenever something was on her mind, she spoke it out immediately. No holding back, no careful thinking, no waiting for emotions to settle. She believed, if I say it out loud, I'll feel lighter. But in reality, it was the opposite. The more she spoke, the heavier she felt, because what came out of her mouth was not gentle sharing. It was frustration, disappointment, and blame her husband, at first tried to listen. He explained. He tried to understand. But over time, he became silent, not because he did not care, but because he realized whatever he said would not help. And the more he spoke, the worse things became. Gradually, the house became quieter, but it was not peace. It was distance. The children also began to change. They shared less. They spoke less, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were afraid of being blamed, afraid of being judged, afraid of words that would hurt them. And then one day, Lou realized something painful. She talked a lot, but no one truly wanted to listen anymore. The more she spoke, the emptier she felt. The more she spoke, the colder the home became. Then one day, she met an older woman in the neighborhood. The woman did not preach, did not use complicated words. She simply said, "Not everything spoken brings relief. Some things, when held back, bring peace. Not everything said is honesty. Sometimes holding back is love, because words, once released, can never be taken back. But thoughts, if kept inside, can settle, can be understood again, and can be spoken at a better time." Those words were simple, but they touched her deeply. From that day on, Lee began to practice something very small. Whenever she wanted to speak, she paused for a moment, not to suppress herself, but to ask, "Is this necessary? Will this hurt someone? Will this make things better? Or am I just releasing my frustration?" At first, it was difficult. Sometimes she still slipped, but gradually she realized something. The less she spoke, the lighter she felt. The more she held back, the warmer the home became. Her husband began to open up again. Her children grew closer, not because she made big changes, but because she learned to hold back unnecessary words. And that is what many people do not realize. Self-control is not suppression. It is understanding that every word carries energy. It can heal. It can hurt. It can build. There is something that many people take a long time to truly understand. Not everything spoken solves a problem, and silence is not always avoidance. Sometimes silence is the wisest choice, because not every situation requires a reaction. Not every word deserves a response. There was a driver who spent his days on long roads, meeting all kinds of people. Some were polite, some were difficult, some were unreasonable, some spoke without respect. In the past, he would react immediately. He would argue. He would not hold back. But after one incident, when an argument almost caused an accident, he began to change. From that day on, whenever he heard harsh words, he simply smiled, not because he was weak, but because he understood. If he responded with anger, things would get worse. If he stayed calm, things could pass quickly. One day, A passenger spoke to him very harshly, for no real reason. He stayed calm. He did not argue. He did not react. After a while, that same passenger came back and apologized. They said, "I'm having a bad day." If he had reacted earlier, it might have turned into a serious conflict. That is the power of restraint. Not loud, not visible, but quietly protecting you, protecting others, and protecting the situation itself. Those who cannot control their words often bring trouble upon themselves. Those who know how to pause avoid many problems before they even begin, not because they are luckier, but because they do not create more turbulence with their own words. There is something worth reflecting on. Very few people regret what they did not say, but many people regret what they did say. If only I had stayed silent. If only I had not said that. If only I had thought more carefully. These thoughts appear often, but always after everything has already happened, after words have caused harm, after relationships have cracked, after trust has been worn down. So, a wise person does not wait until regret to learn silence. They learn it now, from the moments when they almost spoke but chose to stop, from the times when they wanted to win but chose to step back. And in those very moments, wisdom begins to appear. After everything, there is a deeper truth. You cannot speak gentle words if inside you there is a storm. You cannot speak peaceful words if your mind is restless, because words are only what appears on the surface. The real root lies within. The Zen master Hu Nung taught, when the mind is angry, words are angry. When the mind is heated, words are heated. When the mind is calm, words are calm. So, if you want to change your speech, you cannot just try to speak nicely. You must begin with becoming aware of your mind. When you are angry, it is not the time to speak. When you are irritated, it is not the time to explain. When emotions are rising, it is not the time to decide. It is the time to pause, breathe, and step back, not to avoid, but to prevent things from getting worse. There was a truck driver who used to have a very hot temper. Whenever someone drove recklessly, he would be ready to argue. One time, a small incident almost turned into a fight. After that, he was warned and nearly lost his job. From then on, he trained himself with a very simple habit. Whenever he felt angry, he reminded himself, not worth it, not necessary, not wise, just 3 short phrases, but they helped him stop. Many times there were moments he was about to speak, but then he chose not to, not because he was weak, but because he understood he does not need to react to everything. He does not need to win every situation. Gradually, his life began to change. His work became more stable. His health improved. His family became more peaceful, all because he learned to hold back a single sentence. And that is something very important. When words are not yet spoken, karma has not yet formed. When words are spoken, karma has already been planted. To undo it takes a long time. That is why people say, if you cannot yet guard your mind, guard your mouth first, because guarding your mouth is the fastest way to prevent harm. Guarding your mind is a longer path, but a more lasting one. When you begin to notice your emotions, not act on them immediately. Create a pause before speaking. That pause is where wisdom appears. In this life, there are many things people regret, but there is one pattern that appears again and again. In so many lives, it is not regret for what was left unsaid, but regret for what was said. If only I had stayed silent. If only I had not said that. If only I had thought more carefully. These thoughts are not rare. They appear after arguments, after breakups, after relationships begin to crack. And the most painful part is, by the time you realize it, it is already too late. There was a woman who lived with her elderly mother-in-law. Life was not too difficult, but every day there were small frictions. At first, she tried to be patient, but over time, as exhaustion built up, as pressure accumulated, she began to speak without restraint. Sometimes it was just a complaint, but inside there was irritation. Sometimes it was just a reply, but it carried frustration. The mother-in-law did not react immediately, but inside she slowly grew distant. The gap between them did not come from one big event, but from small words, repeated day after day, like water wearing down stone. By the time it was noticed, the relationship was no longer the same. Then one day, the mother-in-law fell ill, lying in bed, growing weaker each day. Only then did the daughter-in-law truly regret. She remembered the words she had said, the moments she lost control, the times she spoke just out of anger. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to make up for it. She wanted to speak more gently, but time does not wait. Some apologies, even when spoken, still have value, but they are no longer complete, because some things can only be done right. When there is still time, words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. Apologies are like medicine. They may soothe, but they cannot fully erase the wound. So, a wise person is not someone who apologizes well, but someone who does not have to apologize too often, because they understand holding back a sentence is always easier than repairing the damage it causes. And that is a truth, very simple, yet rarely lived. There is something that sounds simple, but carries great power. Change the way you speak, and your life can change. You do not need to do anything extraordinary. You do not need to completely transform who you are. You only need to slow down a little when you speak. Soften your tone a little, and think a little before you talk. That alone is enough for things to begin shifting. There was a man who was very straightforward. Whatever people said, he would respond immediately. He would not hold back. He would not accept losing. At first, people saw him as honest and direct, but over time, they began to feel tired because every conversation required caution, afraid of saying something wrong, afraid of being challenged, afraid of being put in an uncomfortable position. Gradually, people stopped coming to him. They shared less, invited him less, included him less. He could not understand why. He had done nothing wrong. Yet people kept their distance until one day a friend spoke honestly. It's not that you are a bad person. It's that you don't know how to hold your words. Talking to you feels like walking on a tightrope. That is why people are careful around you. Those words shook him, and for the first time, he truly looked at himself. He realized he was not wrong, but the way he spoke was exhausting others. From that moment on, he began to change, not to be fake, not to please others, but to slow down before speaking, think before responding, put himself in the listener's place. There were moments when he would normally react, but instead he chose silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew saying it would not make things better. Gradually, everything changed. His relationships improved. People felt more comfortable around him. His work also became smoother. He realized something very important. Not everything that is true needs to be said. Not everything that is right needs to be said immediately. And being honest does not mean hurting others. There is a thought worth reflecting on. Sometimes losing in words is winning in life. You may win an argument, but lose a relationship. You may be right, but if the way you speak is wrong, the outcome is still loss. On the other hand, if you change the way you speak, you can preserve people, preserve opportunities, and preserve peace within yourself. And that is something many people only realize after many painful experiences, after all the stories, the conflicts, the losses, and the moments of regret. One truth becomes very clear. Much of the suffering in life does not come from big events. It comes from small frictions, repeated every day, and within those frictions, words are often where everything begins. A sentence spoken without thinking, a reaction given before calming down, a moment without restraint, repeated again and again, little by little, until it becomes distance, coldness, and relationships that are no longer the same. People often believe, as long as they live well, do the right things, that is enough. But if words are not guarded, all the goodness can slowly fade because of the way we speak, because people may forget what you did, but they rarely forget how your words made them feel. A warm sentence can be remembered for a long time, but a hurtful one is remembered even longer. So, guarding your speech is not something small. It is the root of peace, the foundation of relationships, and the key to a lighter life. The Zen master Hu Nung pointed out, everything begins in the mind. Words are only the outward expression of what is happening within. So, controlling speech is not just about holding the mouth. It is about understanding your mind, pausing when the mind is unsettled, not letting emotions lead when you are angry. Do not speak when you are irritated. Pause when you do not fully understand. Do not react immediately, not to avoid, but to prevent more suffering, because in life there are things you can fix after doing wrong. You can turn back after going the wrong way, but words, once released, have no path back. Like a broken cup, even if repaired, it is never the same. So, a wise person is not afraid of speaking less. They are only afraid of speaking when the mind is not calm. They are not afraid of silence. They are only afraid of letting emotions speak, because one wrong sentence can create consequences that last for years. In this life, there are things, when held back, become blessings when released, become harm, and words are one of them. Holding back a single sentence can protect a relationship, a family, an opportunity, and a lifetime of peace. But releasing one harsh sentence can take away things that are not easily restored. A wise person is not someone who speaks well, but someone who knows when to speak, knows when to stop, and knows when to remain silent. A person of virtue is not someone who always does great things, but someone who avoids small things that cause harm, because those small things accumulate into great karma, not in one moment, but in each sentence, each reaction, each time we fail to restrain ourselves. But when you begin to understand, everything starts to change. Pausing, softening your words, choosing silence at the right time no longer feels forced. It becomes a natural choice, because no one truly wants to create more suffering for themselves. No one wants to destroy what they already have. And then, at some point, you will realize peace is not a life without turbulence. It is not letting your own words create more turbulence. Peace is not the absence of difficult people. It is not responding in ways that make things worse. Peace does not come from perfection. It comes from knowing how to remain steady within imperfection. If today you can simply hold back one sentence, soften one harsh word, pause once when emotions rise, then that is already a very big step. You do not need to change everything in one day. Just be a little better each day, and you will see your life begin to change in a quiet and gentle way. Thank you for staying until the end. If these words helped you slow down, feel a little lighter, or reflect a little deeper, then that is already something meaningful. May you always keep a calm mind, a gentle voice, and a peaceful life. And now, as this moment slowly comes to an end, Just take a gentle breath and allow everything to soften. In this life, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to always say the right thing, and you don't have to change everything all at once. Sometimes, peace begins with something very small. A sentence you choose not to say, a reaction you choose to pause, a moment where you let your mind become quiet. Because in the end, peace is not a life without noise, but a life where you no longer create noise with your own words. So tonight, let everything that is heavy slowly fade away. Let every tension gently loosen and let your mind return to stillness. You are safe. You are allowed to rest, and you are allowed to be at peace. There is nothing you need to fix, nothing you need to prove, and nowhere you need to rush to. Just breathe slowly, gently, and let sleep come to you naturally. Asirs, good night.